Okay, so my name's Percy. I'm a farmer and a rancher. I've been doing it for about 10 years. I started in Kamloops and I moved here. I teach ranching at TRU and I consult to ranchers and farmers that are setting up with fencing and infrastructure and getting set up with grazing. So that's kind of my background. And I spent about 15 years with the provincial government doing a variety of different things, research, policy, management. And I think cows are easier to work with than bureaucrats. And so I like what I do, and I have a strong desire to make sure that we have a food-safe community, that we are nutritionally supporting ourselves, and we're strong, and we can work the land, and we're going to be here if shit hits the fan, which maybe it will. I don't know. Hey. So, a couple disclaimers. One, I'm just going to share some references because I want people to be able to take some of the things I'm finding and research them beyond what I explain to them. Peer-reviewed science is great, but peer-reviewed science is a one-sided thing. Not all peer-reviewed science is, think of what a peer is when we think about science. And finally, grazing is more than just cows, but my expertise is cattle and a little bit of pigs, but sheep graze, goats browse, elk graze, bison graze. So I'm going to think about this as opportunities for more than just cattle grazing. But a lot of the examples I use are simply cows because that's my forte. And I absolutely love looking at paintings of old cows because look how big they are. They're not like these skinny tall cows that we have that are designed for feedlots. Like, look at this ox. I bet that thing could just like move your car out of the way if it was stuck, right? So, anyways, yeah, that's my spiel. So I acknowledge that we are in Chukwetmulu. Chukwetmulu is translates as where the water flows from the highest mountains down into our beautiful lake into the ocean. And a really important thing that I want to acknowledge here is that knowledge and learning and language is where our strength as a community lies. And that's where the Chukwetmulu people have existed, since time immemorial. So I really want to promote this thought that, yes, we have all this written information and you can Google anything or find a YouTube video or something, but if all of a sudden we have a satellite attack, I want us to be libraries, we have information in our heads, and then we can keep moving past the apocalypse. So there's a lot of talk nowadays about regenerative grazing, if anyone's heard the term, or advanced grazing, or adaptive multi-cell grazing, or blah, blah, blah. So basically, in North America, Turtle Island, all the Great Plains were covered with millions of bison, right? And grass and bison, or grass and any ruminant for that matter, have evolved so that they coexist in a way that they basically regenerate each other. So bison or cows, they eat grass, and then the grass grows back when the bison move on. We now have this thing where we put cows in a field with a fence and we eat everything into the ground, and that's our grazing season. And that's not really the natural relationship between cows and grass. Think about that. Think about all those animals. Think what that would do to that grassland. They're going to graze this area. They're going to graze it down. They're going to poop. They're going to pee. They're going to do their thing. It's going to give that environment a brief stress that's essentially going to regenerate it, because they're not going to come back there for years, and that is just going to explode after that. And that's the cycle that we want to regenerate for ourselves. Unfortunately, we came over as settlers, or our ancestors, and we destroyed that. And the Indians were in the way of plowing all those fields. So although we, as our ancestors said, well, we will save the bison and we'll save you, that did not happen. And basically, the actual regenerative food system was completely wiped out in a very short period of time. The bison were gone. Most of the tribes were then, their way of life was destroyed, and along came the plow, and to this day, we are continually mining a lot of these soils of the carbon that those bison put underground for decades, thousands of years. So, luckily, we have some electric fencing, and we have ruminants still, so on a little microcosmic scale, we can kind of in a way repeat what the bison did. We can move cattle around, we can keep the grass fresh, the cattle are always moving around so they're healthy, they're not taking second or third bites, they're just taking the tips, they're moving on. Now, the cool thing about this is that this is what puts carbon underground. When we plow, we release carbon because we break up the soil and all that carbon goes in the atmosphere. So there's all this talk about global warming nowadays, and climate change, and cows get a lot of the bad rap, especially when they're standing at 100,000 of them in a feedlot, getting fed barley or corn or whatever. But this, done properly, puts carbon underground. And I'll show you some data briefly that shows this later on in my slide. So we can do this. And we can do it very easily. And we can do it here. And we can then eat those animals without sending them anywhere because we've got knowledge here on how to make jerky. And we can do this. So the more of the people that do it, then the more we have a food system for ourselves that then we can repeat and get going. And I'll continue. So those grass are grazed. And when they're grazed, they're going to come back to life. And then they're going to grow new solar panels, and those solar panels are going to take a bunch of carbon dioxide and they're going to put it underground as carbohydrates. And this is a pine tree, but you can just imagine how much root exudates, which are sugars that grasses and plants put underground to basically feed all the bacteria and fungi, and then you have this relationship where they're exchanging nutrients, and that's the underground soil life that's starting to happen. And the great thing about grasses is that they have these massive big root systems, especially like this rough fescue that grow in the prairies. You can just imagine how much energy exchange is happening in that soil. Those black soils that formed in a lot of areas. And I have black soil on my farm, but it's organic because it's high water table soil. It's different than that. But regardless, it's all organic matter. It's all plants that went underground. Incredible holding capacity, incredible nutrient exchange capacity, and we can use cows to make more of that. We can also use cows done incorrectly to make less of that if we do it wrong, so we want to do it right. And now we have the technology and the knowledge to do that. We've had it for a long time. We just have to get things happening. Here's a paper, I think this is out of Alberta. So basically we have these extensive grasslands, and they had little exclosures, and they compared inside and outside, so they have a moderate, nice, properly grazed field with overgrazing, and they find that actually, pardon me, let me back up. They have exclosures where they've grazed, they have exclosures where they haven't grazed at all, and they have everything else around it. And what they find is, where you graze, you actually get more soil carbon than when you don't graze at all. Because you're getting this regenerative effect of the cows eating the grass, and if done properly and you don't bite too much, the grass regrows, you get more solar panels, more root exudates go underground, more soil carbon happens, the plants grow, and we have science coming out that says, great, done properly, we can put carbon underground. Yay! Even better, we want to hold our water, which is even more. We are in this, these droughts that seem to happen all the time. So if we put more of this carbon underground by grazing properly, we can then hold more water in our ground. So then the grazing season and the growing season lasts longer. It's more drought, it's more climate resilient. It's a beautiful system, and done properly, we don't need to store as much water in lakes and pipes and pumps and ponds. Let's just store it in our soil. That's where it's actually the most stable and the least way to evaporate. In doing some of my research that I'm kind of always doing, I stumbled across something that is really fascinating. This is a little segue. Has anyone heard of bioprecipitation? Okay, so when a raindrop forms, it precipitates around a little something. It's either going to be a pollen spore or a speck of dust. So either it's going to be something biological or it's going to be something mineral-based, dust, right? Now, the neat thing about this is that if it's biological source, in other words, it's a pollen spore, a little speck of like a plant material or something like that, it doesn't go up very high in the atmosphere, and it comes back down as rain, and it kind of makes these local rain cycles. If you have dust from a desert or massive amounts of thousands of acres of plowed fields, and that mineral soil dust gets up into the atmosphere, it goes up higher, and then when it precipitates, it's going to precipitate somewhere farther away. So the more plants that we have and plant and biological activity that's making all these things that's getting up there, the more we're going to get local rains and we're less severe storms. So bioprecipitation is something that nobody's talking about that I really wish we would, because anyways, that's my segue into how to get more grass. So the more animals we have, not less animals. My computer a while ago said, eat some eco-friendly meals, try these recipes, and they're all these vegan recipes. Now I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, we actually need people to eat more meat because we need more grazing animals to grow more grass, to build more soil, to suck more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and put it into the ground. So the whole basic concept in a nutshell is, okay, so here's my little microcosm of a farm. And I have this whole field here on this creek here. There's a whole field here. And if you notice, the animals are standing on this spot here where I had been winter feeding, and so they've eaten all that grass down, and it will grow back. But you notice there's no fence here, but they've started to go out in here. So I have put electric fence along that dark green line, and they've just moved into a new spot, and they're just taking new bites of new grass. And then in about another day, I'm going to move here, and then I'm going to move here, and I'm going to move here. And the benefit of doing this, I have a couple benefits. One, I'm not giving all those cows access to the entire field. They're only going to eat the grass, and they're not going to eat the weeds. You can just imagine that you're only going to get weeds. So the more you can find them, the more you move them around a little mob, it's not hard to do, the less weeds you're going to have and the more grass you're going to have. The other benefit is, this is still growing right now, right? So if you were to take 30 cows and put them in 1 acre, they're going to graze all that, and then they're going to move on. If you took 30 acres and put 1 cow in there and did the opposite, their grass is never really going to grow because it's always being grazed. Grass does not grow when it's being grazed. Grass grows when it's being rested from grazing. And that is like the most key point that we really as a ranching, farming community are starting to grasp now. Oh, so if we take this field and put a fence halfway down and we graze this for the first half of the summer and this for the second half of the summer, we're probably going to get a bit more productivity out of that field. And you can just imagine why, because now that first half is going to regrow. So what if you do the extreme of that? What if you just gave them just this little bit, and then just this little bit, and just this little bit, and they can't go back and take a second or a third bite of what they already did? So that's where this whole regenerative concept is. You're trying to minimize the amount of area that they all get at one time, so that you get the maximum amount of area being growing at one time. And now we have electric fences, and you can move them around, and you can get these fences that are these tumble wheels, and you can have your fence that just rolls down the field. It's a beautiful thing. You can do some amazing things with technology nowadays. So the other benefit is that they're always eating lush green grass. They're not eating old rank grass because they're not going back to something they had grazed for a month or two or an entire summer. So if you're doing any grass finishing like I do, and you grass finish your own beef, I don't feed them grain, they're always, that plane of nutrition in the summer when the grass is lush is always going like this. And if you know, it's kind of like a natural feedlot. When they butcher animals, they want to have them at a plane of nutrition where they're growing and fattening as fast as they possibly can, and then they slaughter them. And that's when you get the most interstitial marbling, that's when you get the most back fat, that's when you get the nice tender meat, that's where you get the flavor from. So we can sort of mimic the feedlot in a grass by moving them around so they are always getting fresh bites.
Do you prefer we save our questions to the end, Percy?
Go for it.
So you said you finish them on grass?
Yes.
What happens in the winter time? Like what yeah.
I don't finish the winter.
So, okay. Maybe I'll ask you a little bit later about like that timeline of butchering this.
Yeah. we can talk about that. I'll come back to it a little bit too. Okay?
Okay.
May I ask a question as well?
Certainly.
So do you only feed them grass then?
Yeah, and hay.
Okay, so how do you know that they're getting enough food?
I look at them and I see what they're doing, and I watch their brisket. Is their brisket getting fat? Is that little pocket in their back, is it starting to fill in with fat?
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
We can't farm with recipes. We have to farm with feel. We have to look, right? And so this is community knowledge that we all need to start to know what a fat cow looks like, right? Okay, so here's something I use in my course when I teach grazing. This first plant is the control, so it was not clipped. You know, the simulation of grazing. This one here was clipped once at a halfway point, and this here was clipped 3 times. Now, you can see how this one is tall, not much for leaf area. This one has a lot of leaf area, and this one is kind of stunted a little bit. So what happens is, when you clip or you graze, you're taking off what's called the apical meristem. And so you have this plant that's about to bolt up, and when it's putting up its little grass flower, like grasses make flowers, you may not think that, but they are, make up their flower and their seed heads, it's a lot of energy that goes into those finite plant parts because they have to do a bunch of, you know, DNA work and genetic work and flower, and there's a lot of energy that goes into that, right? So if you remove that flowering bud, the plant says, oh, but it's still growing season, I can still do things. So I'm going to put all this, it's called interstitial meristematic tissue, all the leaf tissue is going to start to grow because I've still got energy, I've still got moisture in the soil, and so if you cut this off halfway, all of a sudden the plant is going to go, and it's going to increase its solar panel capacity. This is not, although this is actually putting out seeds and flowers, and it's good for the, you know, the reproduction of the grass, what this is happening here is that the plant is actually growing. Biomass is being generated, and sugars are being put underground. So we are then sequestering more carbon. So the more grass that we can keep at this really nice vegetative state, the more that, 1, the grass is nice, so the cattle do better on it. 2, we're putting more sugars and carbohydrates underground, so we're building rich, deep soils. It's a beautiful system. If, however, we do this and we graze 3 times, like we don't take the cows off too soon or we don't move them around enough, then we end up in this situation where we've stunted the grass, we've taken away too many of the solar panels, and then we're starting to move ourselves back. So here at this point, we're probably starting to draw from the soil. So our goal as good grazers is to get this and lots of this and keep it at this. So this means that in June, sometimes you need to move your cattle 3 times a day because the grass is growing so fast in June and July because the sun's at its peak. So you have to get your fences slick, you move them across your whole entire farm. Once you're grazing in, you know, August, September, you can slow things down. But if you really want to maximize the productivity of your land, moving them around, not letting them take 2nd and 3rd bites, keeping your grass like this is your soil just screaming with love. Now, you've probably seen this where you have the deer, and the deer are all in the fall out where the green lush grass is. And the reason why this green lush grass is here is because this was a hayfield that was cut. Right? So it's kind of simulating what that grass that was, right? So you cut the hay and you get this flush of grass in the fall. And I'm not going to say that this, because you removed hay, that's actually a bit of a draw on the soil carbon bank, but just as to prove a point, the deer want to go where the lush grass is in the fall, and they're going to be standing there, right? So it's also a beautiful thing. You can grow wildlife and condition grass by grazing properly, and then the herds of deer and elk will just follow your cows around because they're going to go where the grass has been conditioned and it's started to come back and it's nice and green and lush. It's ice cream to them. It's harder to do that with barbed wire fence. Now, this is not in the Shuswap, this is in the South Okanagan. Barbed wire was invented about 180 years ago or so by a guy in Texas, and that was basically the first step at really starting to destroy, led a whole bunch of climate problems exist. Because as you can imagine, you can put that fence line in and the cows can stand there all summer long and you can graze into the ground, and it's like that photo of the grass over here had been clipped 3 times. Well, just imagine if it was clipped 5 times. I mean, it's going to be a lawn after a while, right? So this is a photo I use in my grassland ecology slide. And in grassland communities develop these big, rich, deep-rooted perennial bunch grasses over time, and they form and they're just absolutely stunning. But if you continuously graze them, they start to fall out, the bunch grasses start to die out, and you get more and more and more sagebrush. So this would be a late cereal. Succession is allowed to continue a little bit. The grazing is not nearly as heavy as on this side. You can see dirt between the sagebrush, right? So barbed wire fence has done us a lot of disservice. When you think about the cowboys that would have thousands of head and they had to get on their horses and ride all of these cows, all the way from, Oklahoma up to Chicago to the meat markets. They're finishing their beef across massive open areas. Just imagine what that meat system was like, right? But now we have everything all chunked up into little barbed wire fences. So, barbed wire. Anyways ever read this book? It's often possible to double and triple grass yield as compared to that of continuous grazing. So, good grazing is going to double or triple the amount of forage that you're going to grow on your land just by doing it well. And this, Andre Voisin is like the pinnacle of this. He started the true advanced grazing years and years ago. So, anyways, this is the Bible of grazing, and if you read this book, you don't have to. I'll give you the primer. He says the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And in the book, he says, if you're having any problems, it's because you're not grazing properly. So there's the spoiler alert for grass productivity. But it started the base of everything. And Alan Savory started, he was the one that really started to do mob grazing in Africa and getting deserts to grow grass again. So a big nod to Alan for following Andre's work. Another book that Andre Voisin wrote, Soil, Grass, and Cancer. This book does not say that eating beef causes cancer, okay? It actually says the opposite. It says that when you graze and you build soil, that soil is so good for us that disease goes away, right? Soil fertility was directly linked to human and animal disease. And that's a line from the book, but really what that should say is soil fertility was directly linked to human and animal health. Let's not think about the elephant in the room. Let's think about the positive, right? So in other words, grass-fed beef is good for you. I have to say that. And I'm a shameless self-promoter of my own products, but at least there's literature here that supports that, and we spend billions on cancer research every year to find a cure for cancer. Here's one. Fred Provenza wrote this book, Nourishment. It's a fascinating book about how something we've lost ourselves, but animals select what they want to eat, not based on flavor. They select what they eat based on what the nutrient content is, right? So this is a beautiful book. I actually highly recommend even non-farmers read this book because it's a really beautiful book. And he breaks things apart as opposed to trying to simplify them. So for example, he has an experiment where there was 2 groups of steers, and the steers were fed in like a feedlot style where they were fed their mixed rations all together. And then there's other groups where he took the corn and the oats and the barley and everything and he separated it all out, and he found that the second group actually grew more total weight than the first group because the individuality of those animals in that pen was able to select for the things that they needed, not what they wanted. Totally fascinating. Nature isn't an isolated building block, but rather appears as a web of relationships. Relationships and the dynamic energy flows between them is what's happening under the soils, and that's what we need to cultivate. It's not just about simple building blocks. This is also another absolutely incredible agricultural book. If anyone's ever read Quality Agriculture, I highly recommend you buy a copy. It's a book of interviews with a bunch of neat farmers that are doing very advanced things. This one, Michael Menil said, I believe that soil can grow an extremely high-yielding, healthy plant with minimal additions of inputs. There are plenty of minerals in the soil if you treat it properly. So what he's saying is, everything is already in the soil. If you treat the soil properly, it's just going to do itself. It's a beautiful thing. We don't necessarily have to add NPK if we have cover crops, so we have grazing and we're integrating livestock and doing those things, because all of a sudden, the more sugars you put into the soil, the more food there is for microorganisms and fungi and bacteria to break down mineral soil and make more minerals available and exchange it with plants and bring it up into the upper above ground that then you know, animals can eat, and then we can eat those animals, and then we need more nutrients, and then we don't have to go and buy zinc and selenium supplements for ourselves. Let's just get it straight from the soil, from a system that works. Rudolf Steiner has invented the biodynamic farming, and he has this beautiful pictograph of, if you could just imagine what soil is like, you imagine a cow eating underground, pooping above ground, and you're constantly bringing life up from the soil, just as this beautiful system is. We're trying to bring life up from underground. It's not about spraying something onto the ground to make it grow. It's about cultivating what's underground and bringing it up. I realized all of a sudden I'm giving all these book reviews. This is a book review talk. This is another great book. Mark Schatzker goes around the world. He tries all this beef from all over the place. He tries the Chianina in Italy, and the Wagyu in Japan, and the Highland in Scotland, and the filet mignon in Paris, and basically at the end of the book, and then at the end of the book he even buys a cow and he feeds it like walnuts and acorns and tries to like make a really beautiful steak. And then he realizes that just grass-fed beef coming from the richest soils that have been grazed properly for a long period of time made this like beautiful steak with umami flavor that is to die for. And you know, the Texas corn-fed beef, feedlot beef, he kind of described as like eating a wet sock. Mm-hmm. So this is a great book, and it's like it's one of the many Bibles I have in my collection. So also a good read, by the way. So do not become too comfortable with what knows to be true. Question healthily. What is healthy? And question healthily. Question all these things, because there's so many hidden things out there that we don't think about. And I just, there's a lot of them I can think of off the top of my head. And then the other day I stumbled across this interesting piece. So this is Ewan Campbell out of New Zealand, and he does a lot of mineral additions and microbial additives that you can give to the soil that gives the soil a boost. And he's not a fan of chemical sprays. And yes, we think of the chemicals as they're bad on us, they're hard on our livers, they're hard on our bodies. But then he actually even goes so far into it's actually just the reflectance of these chemicals from the sun makes you sick itself. And so we don't even think about reflectance, and we're all wearing plastic clothes, and I want to wear wool and organic cotton. I don't want to have to wear my nylon yoga pants. I mean, so we start to think about other things that are not as easy and tangible. So here we have just sheer reflectance of the chemicals on a sunny day makes them sick. And so anyways, he found an organic golf course, and now we can golf again. Now, when I stopped using a pour-on, it's called an ivermectin. It's right out there. Not ivermectin, pardon me, Ivomec, which is a combination of a bunch of insecticides that you pour on the back of your cattle, and it stops lice, so they say. When I stopped using that about 10 years ago, I noticed that the cattle in the spring would slick off. And I was grazing 3 herds at one time, and I had my beautiful herd that didn't have pour-on, I didn't have lice, I didn't have worms, I didn't have anything, and they're slicking themselves off in the spring, and they look great next to the 2 herds of my neighbors that use pour-on, and it's June and they still have winter fur. I just thought, this is really bizarre. And then I started to notice I had cowbirds coming on my cows. So, you know, I don't have worms on my cows or things on their back, but all of a sudden I started to see, like, this is biodiversity. This is a beautiful thing. So, anyways, I don't have this cow anymore, but this is one of my favorite photos. And if you look carefully, there's 2 little cowbirds sitting on there. We want that. You know, it was like when we used to, you know, farm in the prairies 50 years ago. You'd have all these birds that would come and swoop in following the combines. Well, they don't do that anymore because it's just all this dust and heavy metals from the 5 applications of the glyphosate that they've had to spray that year. More quality agriculture quotes. It's been a real challenge for us to innovate our food production system using science. So I'm a scientist. I have a master's in science, and it was a true science. You know, I did my research, and I have my inferential for statistical results that I wrote into a thesis, and blah blah blah. But really, it's the inadequacies of the system don't allow us to put it all together. They kind of take it all apart. It's the reductionist science where we look at this finite little thing, but we might not see the whole system, right? We're tripping over loonies to get to dimes. So let's put the whole system back together. Let's look opportunistically at what we can do. This is my herd, and I'm grazing fields that don't get used for anything else because you can't do anything else with them. What a great way to grow food. I'm not competing with anything. This is a stand, reed canary grass and brome, and there's wet areas on here, so they can't farm it or hay it or anything, and so nothing's been happening with it for years. So I'll just put my cows on there and I'll graze it. But I'm going to move them like this, so that they eat the thistles and the reed canary and everything all at the same time. And they look fat and they look great and the beef tastes good. And so I'm going to continue doing that because I'm also not competing with you know, a corn production or something else because I'm using land that's not being used for something else. So in the Shuswap, we have lots of this land all over the place and little pockets that exist, and we could be making a lot better use of it. And if you have a herd of cattle that are trained to electric fence, you can kind of put them anywhere. So. And the beautiful thing is I'm also regenerating soils. And I found last year I was on this one field and I stopped because 2 years ago, actually, pardon me, because the snow was coming and I wanted to bring them home before the snow came. And then this year I was looking at the way the field grew and I noticed that where I stopped grazing, all the reed canary grass went into flower, but where I had not grazed, it was kind of more stagnant and it wasn't quite as productive. I thought that was really interesting. I regenerated that field. It grew more. It built soil. Observation. There was no science to it. I didn't collect any data. I apologize. So anyways, all this nutrient-rich grass-fed beef is what we ate for the longest time. Has anybody read this book? So anyone heard of the Weston Price Foundation? Okay. So Weston Price went around the world. He was a dentist in the 30s, and he got all these people to do this. Show us your teeth. Show us your teeth. Look at them all do this. And what he found was that anybody that lived on native foods had these big wide arches, 0 cavities, they never brushed, their necks were big, their faces were big, they didn't have, their kids were healthy, they didn't require supervision, there was no instances of, you know, like, so we need to go back to this way of growing food and getting the food to people and having the people eat the food so that we can live on this nutrient-dense diet that then we don't also need to go and buy supplements and buy medicines and buy antidepressants and all these other problems. There's so much that we can solve. And I'm not going to say that we're going to solve all the problems with our food, but there's a lot we can solve with just our food. You know, our mind is important too. Let's not forget that. So, I read this book a little while ago. It's interesting. It's necessary to rewrite the change of our paradigms of food production. Feeding humanity should not depend on the extinction of farmers and extinction of species. So I was just reading just before Christmas in the it's actually in the Country Life that the drop-in farm classified land is dropped by 30%. So there's less farmers out there. There's less land being farmed. Like, there's something wrong with this system. Isn't there more people? Don't we need more food? But we have less land actually being farmed. Like, what's going on here? I haven't read this book. Actually, no, I have read it. I have read it a little bit. But this is like the big one. When beef started to be attacked, the feedlot beef, a lawyer decided to become a rancher and decided to write a book and try to save this a little bit. So she says something interesting that I really like. Dispersed, grass-based, smaller scale farms can and should become the basis of us, our community. And we have lots of little farms all over the place. How many little old dilapidated barns do you see all over the place? All throughout the Shuswap, right? There's little dairy farms. I grazed 2 of them that were dairies 50 or 60 years ago that aren't now. The grass is still good. Like, the great thing about grass is it always comes back. We had battlefields that destroyed grass. Look, the grass came back. We can graze that. So, how can we come together as a community in the Shuswap and make better use of this grass? And then we can finish our own beef. We don't have to send beef over to somewhere else to get finished and brought back here. Let's save these jobs. Let's save this. Let's save these nutrients. Let's just keep them for ourselves because it's good. Less trucking costs. Less carbon emissions. Does anyone know who White Oak Pastures is? Will Harris. He's in the southern states. We have to winter feed here, so I don't think that this is going to be 100% relevant, but I really want to bring home a point here. This is the carbon footprint, pound per pound. Pounds of meat grown, pounds of carbon emitted. So, this is what beef is getting so much of the bad rap for. So, feedlot beef, 33 pounds emitted for 1 pound of beef grown, right? There's pork, there's chicken. And now, these 2 things are also fed grain. These things are fed grain. A Beyond Burger and an Impossible Burger and a soybean, those are all also beans. The chemicals used to make these things are ridiculous. So, look at grass-fed beef. Look where that is. You know what that means? That's carbon going underground. Wow. So, we have a climate solution right here. And they're telling us, stop eating red meat. No. We need more people eating this. And, oh, by the way, this is also nutritious. Contains all 11 amino acids that we don't make for ourselves. Internet's a great place to steal things. I stole this. So let's grow our own food and food security. Because I don't think anybody in the Shuswap that I'm aware of is growing soybeans, where I can't get wheat gluten on my farm. I can't get meat glue or binders or fillers. So let's not even worry about this. We can just do this all of ourselves. We have solar power, we have lucerne, we have salt, we have water. I don't know what Mulga is. I'm assuming this is probably somewhere in Australia. But it doesn't matter. We can do this. So, we want regenerative agriculture. We want to have peak photosynthesis, grass growing, diversity of systems, diversity of farmers, diversity of crops. Everybody's eating. Everybody's making a little bit of money. We have knowledge. We're sharing it. It's community. We're connected to our food. We're connected with each other. And we're not connected with our environment. We are our environment. We think of ourselves as living in the environment. We do something and the environment might be, it's out there. But no. Like, we are our environment. If I even think I love Mount Ida is going to be more loved just because I'm thinking it. Like, we have to get over this concept that we are totally living these little boxes away from everything. We're all interconnected. So how do we do this? We need knowledge, we need animals, we got that. We got land, we got lots of land. We got hungry people, and we just need to get a little more organized. So, how to get the knowledge? There's formal education, There's grazing clubs. Maybe we need a grazing club here. I'll start a grazing club. We need mentors. I'm a grazing mentor. I will mentor anyone that wants to get into grazing. We need community wealth, and we need community knowledge and collaborative wealth to start to come about, to work together. Or you can take any number of programs to learn how to ranch better. Here's just a couple. These are some of the bigger ones. There's a ton of different ways you can knowledge, or we can just all get together in a room and just talk about this, and we can just figure this out. I know there's enough people around here that raise cattle and ranch. Let's just do this. So when we actually talk about the actual thinking about this, what do we need to think about to get this going? First of all, we're thinking about what the grass is and where it is. Where's our soil types? What's being used? What's not being used? I sit in my house and I look at thousands of acres around me that could be growing meat for people. It's not right now. So I think about how do we plan for this? What's the carrying capacity? Okay, well, there's ways to figure this out. We do a clipping. We figure this is how much this, and this is going to hold this many animals for this period of time, and then we're going to go over here, and this is the carrying capacity here, and we kind of bring it all together. And then we think, well, what are all the things we need to handle the livestock, to breed the livestock, to look after the livestock, to bed them in the winter? How do we deal with sick livestock? How do we finish the livestock so we're growing a food product, we're growing a high quality? A lot of people don't know how to finish grass-fed beef, and then everybody says grass-fed beef is terrible because they're trying to do it in the fall when you can't do it, they don't have enough back fat, and the butchers are complaining. So we have a lot of knowledge to share just about that, so we don't have to bring in a bunch of grain and try to do it or ship them across the mountains. We need to learn how to graze properly so the grass is greener longer so that we can save on feeding costs, because if it's August and you're already feeding hay, you're probably going to lose money. Sorry, we need to grow our grass, get it growing right. Your cows should be digging through grass and to get to snow in the early winter, in the late fall. And how to feed in the winter so that you can use those nutrients properly and not waste all that. I mean, we don't need to bring in fertilizer if we're feeding cows. I mean, anyways, we can use that to fertilize our fields. So then we need to think about, well, how do we own livestock? I mean, I have RSPs, and my cattle actually do better as livestock than my investments do. So maybe we need to get the community investing in livestock that they own, and then they can get the benefit of that meat. Let's all invest in ourselves rather than sending our money off to a broker that's going to take their cut, and then it's going to go off to some other broker, and it's going to end up in some secure exchange fund that you don't have access to if shit hits the fan. At least if you own livestock, you're going to eat. Wow, that just seems like we have to really get consumers on board, because they're the ones that are going to invest in the food system. Then we need efficient breeding of grass systems. We need the right cattle. We need the right sheep. We need the right, so we have the farmers out there that have that. We got this already. And we need diversity in animals. We need, I've talked about cattle a lot simply because I'm a cattle guy and I have some pigs, but there's sheep farmers, there's goat farmers. Sheep farmers, they eat weeds beautifully. Goat farmers, they can clear brush beautifully to contour or to cultivate land. We've got poultry. Poultry is a great fertilizer. If you ever run bird cages to grow meat birds across your fields, those fields don't stop growing grass for years after that. And then we need fencing, and then we need processing capacity and storage. And these are some of the things that we need to start investing in as a community so that we can have our own food system, so we don't have to rely on the one company that sells to everybody. I love buying meat from Askew's, but every grocery store gets all their meat from the same place. It all comes from across the way. It's all, anyways. So we can do that here. We have lots of places to do it. So I think we should get on this and do it. We have lots of hungry people, and we have lots of land that we can start to feed and kind of get these feedback loops starting to happen. And we can do it now. Here's a field of Horiolyssa that no one wanted to graze. Okay, I'll just put my cattle there. There's a temporary fence. Look at them eating those weeds. I didn't have to spray them. I didn't have to apply for a government subsidy because I was losing production because I had too many weeds in my field. Like, wow, what a great system. And then when they're done eating there today, I'm going to move them over here and they're going to continue that. But it's a beautiful thing. So we need some organization, right? So we have farmers, we have ranchers, we have people that maybe want to be farmers and ranchers. We may have landowners that have land that don't know what to do with it, and they want farm status. Well, let's start grazing their land. Let's reduce their taxes. Let's make their soil more fertile. Let's help growing some food for them. So there's a huge connection right here that as a community we need to make major. And then we need to coordinate this whole system. We have grazers, we have the finishers, we have the processors and the butchers, we have the people selling and distributing the stuff. Why not start to make our own jobs here rather than a truck that gets from Calgary and does that for us? Let's do this ourselves. We can do this. Let's have a grazing exchange. They're starting to pop up in other counties in the States where all of a sudden you'll have a map and we have this app, and are you a landowner? Do you need to graze? Sure, you put your dot on a map. Oh, are you have cattle? You need to look for land? Oh, you look for the dots on a map. Oh, are you like, it doesn't even have to be an app thing. It can just be a place that we all go and we all know, we can exchange this information. The more ways that we start to work together and get these interrelationships happening, the more stronger we are going to be as a community. So, whether we call it that or the Solar Panel Club, that's the other name I really like, I think it's really important that we as a community come together, put our systems in place, learn how to do this properly, start growing good meat, good lamb, good beef, good pork, whatever, and we're building land, and we're doing this all ourselves. So, we need more grazers, and we need people to connect them with people with land. We need two of those things. And even if we can't find that many more grazers, we can teach people how to do that. It's not that hard. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there that would love to work with animals. Everybody loves animals. Let's help them with that. It's a really easy thing to do. That's my talk. Thank you. And I'm hoping there'll be a whole bunch of good discussion. Sonia.